myself out.
I am afraid of.
I'm terrified and paralyzed by.
I am deathly afraid of.
Welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast with your host, me, Ryan Perrio. Hello and welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Perrio. This week, my guest is Danyelle Luther. Lyndsey is a photographer and a counselor who specializes in therapy, leaning towards sex therapy. In fact, she has just started a sex therapy practice that you can follow on Instagram at Sex Therapy with Lyndsey. In this episode, me and Lyndsey talk about therapy, her decision to pursue sex therapy, and we talk about her fear of sinkholes. That's right, sinkholes. Nothing to do with therapy or helping people, which is her passion, but sinkholes is in the ground. It's a very interesting fear, and let's get into it with Lyndsey right now. We're here with my friend and counselor, Lyndsey Luther. Lyndsey, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. Glad to have you on. You just apparently got a new gig with counseling as well.
I did. Yeah, I'm going to be having some more clients soon, which is good. I mean, especially with the pandemic going on, it's, no one's really doing a lot of in-person counseling right now. So any chance I can get to help people virtually is always a plus.
Yeah. So how did you get into counseling? What kind of drove you into becoming a counselor?
That's a good question. I wanted to get into addictions initially. So I just have family members, friends that have had problems with addiction. So I thought I wanted to do addictions counseling, and UNT has their rehab counseling program. So I went into it with that in mind, just personal history, thinking that's what I want to do. And then the more I got into the program, the more I learned the tons of different kinds of counseling you can do. And it really just kind of took off from there. It was I didn't really know much. And then going into school, it really opens it up to all the things you can do in counseling.
Yeah. I asked because I have a friend that's a counselor as well. And she got into it because one of her loved ones was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And she went to a grief counselor. And through that grief counselor, she kind of discovered that that's what she wanted to do, is to be that shoulder to cry on. But when she got to counseling, like you said, you're like, oh, we could do this kind of counseling, or there's this. And psychology, to me, was probably the second most fascinating subject I took in college. The little bit I went, because there's just so many different little things.
Yeah, there's so much to know. I mean, I just feel like every day that goes on, there's something else that I don't know, something else I'm learning. I mean, there's just, and we meet therapists and counselors all the time. And I meet professionals that just amaze me, just the work they do. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's amazing what they're doing. So yeah, a lot going on there for sure.
And as I understand, you're also starting to, I guess, branch into sex therapy as well.
Yes, I am branching into sex therapy, practicing that, getting some more education just specifically to sex therapy. And I'm hoping that will be my specialization, the more education and experience I get with that. And that's something I never thought I would do. And I didn't even know sex therapy was an option until I became a therapist. So I'm pretty excited to be learning about that.
What kind of hooked you onto that one, when you kind of delved into it?
I have personally just a history of some sexual trauma. So I think trauma is really what got me into it. I think when you've been traumatized, if you've been sexually assaulted, it's really hard to just have sex again, have it be fun after a bad experience. But I think it's possible. And I think everyone deserves to have help with that. And then from looking at it from a trauma perspective, that's when I really started to learn that lots of people have issues with sex, trauma or not. And so there's so many areas just within sex that you can help someone with. It's really cool.
Yeah. I never, some of that I didn't even think of is that, when things like that, when bad things happen, that doesn't just take, it's not just that moment. There are other moments now that should be a happy moment that may not be because of said trauma back when.
Yeah, because, sex is supposed to be intimate and fun. It's supposed to be with someone that, I'm not saying you have to be like in love with everyone you have sex with, but you should trust them enough to be intimate with them. And after you've been traumatized, you might move on to someone that you do trust, but you can't separate the trauma from the person you're with. And it really can cause a lot of complications.
I can imagine. I struggle with it myself, and it's not just like from a trauma standpoint. It's from it might be trauma. I just wasn't very desired by women, so I don't know if that can't. I guess that counts as trauma. We'll say it's trauma. That was traumatic for me. It's traumatic for me hearing all those no's. But it's one of those things that when you do find someone that does want to be intimate with you after so much rejection, there's this fear I have of not being experienced enough or being as amazing in bed as I possibly could be.
Yeah. Well, fear is definitely a part of it. A fear of rejection is a big one. And I think we have society to kind of blame for that, because when we look at the media and the movies and, pictures of famous people, sex is supposed to be just explosive all the time in between like these two hot people. And it's supposed to be all the things that are just kind of unrealistic a majority of the time. So then when you're in a real world setting, the fear gets in because you compare it to like what you could be, or am I going to be good enough? And yeah, that's definitely a large hurdle for a lot of people to get over.
And sometimes you're just too tipsy to do some of those scenes. Like you try to, and you fall off the bed trying to be sexy, and you just lose your balance because you're not that coordinated to begin with.
Right, and then the moment's kind of lost, and it's like, I understand that completely.
And I feel like sometimes too the moment's lost not because of that. Like if you would have just accepted it and laughed together, I think you could then move on and go back. But I think a lot of people get defensive or embarrassed, and then that puts the guards up, and that's where, because like you said, it's a trust thing. So if you trust them, you can have little moments of awkwardness or sometimes hilarity. That is the only way to describe it, and it still be passionate because the trust is there that yes, we are together, even though that just happened.
Yeah, and laughter helps to build trust. If you're with someone that you can laugh around, there's a level of trust there. So if you can laugh during sex, during the awkward moments, during like the mishaps, whatever might happen, if you can laugh it off and have fun with that, that makes the whole experience even better versus, locking up and just saying, never mind, I messed up,
Or just being ashamed and just, not wanting to talk about it. And then that's when it just, okay, never mind. And
yeah, exactly.
See, laughter is the best medicine.
It really is.
Even for erectile dysfunction. As long as you can trust them enough to laugh about it, things will go back.
That's how it works. That's what I tell all my clients. Just laugh a little bit and you'll be fine.
Well, it's got to be really empowering to both of them to come to you, because it shows that they're at least on the page of, we want to make this work. We want, so even just them agreeing, I feel like is like a super positive step.
Yeah, no, it's a really positive step. And if you see a couple and they are having issues, whether it's just with their relationship or whether it is with like their sexual intimacy, that is a step that shows that they want to make it work. And nothing is taboo as you think. You brought up erectile dysfunction. I would imagine as a man, that's probably really hard to experience. And a lot of men feel like it's very easy to feel like you're alone in that. Like there's something wrong with you. You don't really know how to react to that. And the reality is, it happens to a lot of men, and there's ways to overcome that. There's ways to make sex still enjoyable. It could be a variety of reasons why that's happening. And so it is pretty fun when you get to talk to people, because I think you get to ease their mind a little bit that this isn't as uncommon as maybe they feel it is.
Yeah, I agree. Haven't done much therapy as an adult. As a kid, I did do some for my I guess when my mom went through divorces, she put me in some counseling for each of those. But I would say, there's one of those things of, it's helpful to know that you're not alone, I think is the biggest, I guess, like you said with therapy, one of the biggest positives is it shows you're not alone in this, that maybe it's not the exact same struggle as what you're going through. Like it may not be specifically, it could be, but if it's not, we're close. There's someone that's close in having that. And my friend that is a counselor now was kind of the one that first kind of changed me for that, because she would tell me, you're not the only, a lot of people are angry about such and such or feel that way. You're not special. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, touche.
Yeah, it's a nice reminder. And I get feeling alone because if it's just you experiencing that in the moment and it feels like you can't talk to anybody, it's natural to feel like you're the only person in the world who's going through that. So you can definitely get some comfort from wherever you are. Yeah.
I've definitely felt a lot uncomfortable a lot, and that comes from a lifetime of being bullied. And so there's always the self-conscious fear of sometimes if they're laughing at me. And then I had to realize that I was being defensive because I was taking a laughter or a playful poke of fun as, them making fun of me. And they're not bullying you. You think you're special enough to be bullied all the time just because it happened in the fourth grade.
Yeah, and a lot of people do that. I think sometimes we feel that once we become adults and we move on and we kind of separate from our youth, that we'll get over all that stuff, but it's actually really hard to get over. I still have, insecurities too for me younger, and it could be something that happened 20 years ago. And just one conversation can spark up that insecurity. And I'm like, man, where did that come from? And it's usually from something that was really hard to handle when you were younger.
Wow. I do need to kind of maybe look more into my feelings when that happens, to kind of just backtrack and try to say, okay, what made me feel, when did I feel like that before? Because I've obviously felt that before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be hard to do.
And so, speaking of fear, that's what my podcast is about, people's fears. And you have a very unique fear, probably one of the more unique. I've had some with balloons and cotton balls, so... But go ahead and tell the listeners what your fear is.
My fear is sinkholes. It is my...
I like how you got close to the monitor, like you were just telling a secret, like they can't hear you.
Yeah, if I get closer, they'll hear me better. Yeah, sinkholes, my greatest fear, terrified.
You picked the wrong state. Let's start off by that. You're in the state of Texas is the second most as far as sinkholes in, or at least people that can that occurs. Florida is number one, and that's because they're pretty much surrounded by water on every side. You would think, I guess, because Louisiana, the South, if you ever go like almost to the coast of Louisiana, like it is marsh, and so I guess there's not sinkholes per se, because it's just the whole thing is just going away. But yeah, and that may be just because Texas is just a ginormous state and on the coast. But yeah, Texas is number 2 as far as sinkholes.
Yeah. See, I never knew that. I never knew Texas was number 2. I think maybe I've been too afraid to look. I knew Florida was bad, but I never thought to look, where Texas fell on that list. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that doesn't make me feel too great to know that.
Now, when did this fear start for you?
I had seen on the news, and I don't remember what year this was. I want to say it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, if not longer. But I had saw on the news, it was a guy in Florida, and his house was just sucked in by a sinkhole. Like, he died. He was just asleep, and sinkhole was underneath his house, and it fell in, and they never found his body, but he's gone. And so I saw that on the news, and that was the first time I had ever even heard of a sinkhole. I did not even know a sinkhole was a thing until then. And I just keep thinking my house could just fall in underneath me. And that's such a scary thought. It's so unexpected.
Well, I will put your mind at ease. There are very few sinkholes that are sudden like that. It's a gradual effect. Most sinkholes are what you would see as ponds or sinkholes. Maybe some lakes, small lakes, are sinkholes. It's because a lot of times it's just erosion, basically under the surface. The bedrock that this is kind of built on is water soluble, so it's like either salt, gypsum, and I think limestone is the other one. And so when water doesn't go anywhere, it just seeps down, and as it seeps down, it just slowly cuts into the stone until it's almost like a cavity, and it just gets bigger and bigger the more water just seeps in there. And so you don't know what's happening unless you can see where the other side of it ends, because it just goes out, it just flushes out the other side. Wherever the water's flowing, that's where it's going to go. And so a lot of times it's in the middle. It just gradually gets bigger and bigger. It's like a pothole, and then it gets larger, and then it's just it's just a large pit. In certain situations, probably like that old man had, there's a second type where it flows in the middle of the stone. And so your stone stands as one solid stone, but in the middle, then it starts to slowly split. And so now he's on like a tunnel. And as that tunnel gets bigger and bigger, all of a sudden, then the top collapses. And that's when you have the sinkhole. Somebody had that on, like, I believe it was on a home thing I saw, where their driveway was a sinkhole. And like, it was like a 20-foot drop off. And it was like, it was like a TV show on BBC. It was like, terrible houses or something. It was something about, they bought this house and how much of a nightmare. I think it's like Nightmare Homes. And that's what it was. Is that their driveway just slowly is like a 20-foot pit, and it just is slowly getting towards their house.
Oh my God. So with that house, like with the driveway, was it a slow build? Like did they like notice a hole and then it just got bigger?
Well, it was a small hole. They noticed the small hole in the driveway, and they're like, we need to patch that. But then I think they stepped around it and it got bigger. And then it got to the point where where it's like looking down on a cave.
Oh my gosh. And see, that is the definition of a nightmare home to me.
Yeah. And so
I wouldn't be able to sleep there.
Just thinking that, at one point it could either come to the house or take your house away from you, because I don't know if that would count as probably an act of God as far as insurance goes. So I don't know if that would be something that the insurance company would even pay for to repair, let alone. And so that was one of them. It was really crazy to see. Like, it was like, wow, what a nightmare.
And and I've always wondered, I guess just with any house, I mean, is that part, and again, this may be a really stupid question. I've never bought a house, but I mean, is that part of the overall foundation check? I mean, can they check to see if your house is on eroding, limestone, or
they can check the foundation to see if there's potential water, like there's standing water, like if there's plant life, and say that plant life's wilting, even though there's like water right there, like it looks like it's dying, then that means there's poor water drainage, and so your water's staying there, and it's drowning your plants, even though it's not super wet, it's not super dry, but your plants are still dying. It means that water's not moving. And so you definitely want to, they have, I'll send you the foundation website of things that they check for. And I believe when you buy a house, you will always have a foundation person check it, because I think that's part of the home inspection, is just to get a foundation guy out there to say, hey, what am I looking at? What are some of what you could see as potential problems? And if you see like cracks in the foundation, or if you do own a house and say, you look around your house and say there's like 5 or 6 inches of foundation showing out of the grass, and then you look another day and there's like 2 or 8, you can see a noticeable difference. Like, that didn't look the same. then that may be where you have some sort of erosion effect or something that may be potentially a sinkhole or just your foundation shifting.
Okay. Gotcha. Either way, terrifying to me. I mean, like I said, I've never bought a house, but I know that will be one of the top questions I have, because I would hate to buy a house where there's even like, if they came back and said like, you're at a risk of this, I'd be like, I'm out. Find something else.
You're at a risk for everything buying a home, I think.
I think so too. It's such a scary, it's such a commitment, and not even just, I mean, I'm terrified of a sinkhole, and especially dying from a sinkhole, just falling into one. But even if you had one like in your driveway, how much is that going to cost? It's such a huge commitment just for that to be your property.
Yeah. They say you should have, I believe, half of what you pay down as a, I guess, danger fee. Like you should be able, if you put 20,000 down, you should also have 10,000 set aside for repairs and stuff like that. Like I believe it's some percentage of your down payment that you should have in hand so that if something were to happen, you're able to get it repaired, which rules me out for any home, because I can't afford the down payment, let alone that whatever percentage it is of a down payment.
I can't either. I just hear 20,000 for a down payment, and I'm like, it'll be years before I buy a house.
Yeah, they say that you should try to put down like 20% of the home price.
Well, and the way houses are going right now, I mean, I don't know if you've looked up any. Sometimes I'll look at houses just for fun, like I wonder what's available. It's really hard to get an affordable house anywhere in Dallas. Anything under 2 or 250 is almost questionable. So 20% of that is huge.
Yeah. I look at 2 to 3 bedrooms, and that's as far as I go. I don't need more than that. And
yeah.
So what kind of houses what housing areas do you look at? Do you like go for northern Dallas, or are you like trying to stay mid cities?
Well, I live in Grapevine right now, and I really like Grapevine. And we don't need a big house either. Like a 3-bed, 3-bed, 2 bath would be fine. But houses in Grapevine right now, there's some being built. We're like really close to downtown Grapevine. Some are being built. They're $500,000.
Yep.
And we're like, well, never mind.
Good luck
we will stay in our apartment. Yeah, we'll stay in our apartment. We're good.
Yeah, that's the only thing that bugs me about houses is I'm not building any equity by living here.
Right. Yeah, no, not at all. That's a bummer.
My dad wants me to buy a house. He was like, I was thinking maybe something like 80 to 90,000. It's like, that doesn't exist here. Or if it does exist, it's in the part of Dallas where they, on average, have 1 murder per day.
And it's usually and not even just the neighborhood, but if you buy a house that cheap, I feel like there's going to be so many issues with the house.
Yeah.
It's probably 100 years old, so many issues. It's just a money pit.
Yeah.
And it's in a bad neighborhood. It's not worth
Classic
it.
movie, by the way. So how do you handle your fear of sinkholes? So like, if you see like a hole in the ground, do you get skittish at that point? Does that set off alarm bells that I'm going to be sucked in if I step anywhere near this?
Yes, it does. And I won't even get near it. I won't. I'll go way around it, because I do have this fear that like if there's a hole in the ground and I step even close to it, my step is going to make the hole even bigger. And then if I step again, it's going to be, I don't know how rational that is, but I will purposefully go so far away from it to not risk making it worse and to keep myself safe.
That's an interesting fitness goal. I just don't want to make I want to be able to step around a hole with confidence and know that that I'm not going to be the one that goes down, that it can support. Just.
Oh my God, I know. Well, I'm just like, I'm not signing up for that exposure therapy, right? I'm like, I'll live with my anxiety over this. I don't want to get too close to any holes.
What about the Grand Canyon, the world's largest sinkhole? Would you go look at that? Would you go on the glass bridge?
I've done it before. And this was before I knew what sinkholes were.
Mm-hmm.
I know what the Grand Canyon is, but I guess I was a lot younger than I wasn't. I was just thinking, it's the Grand Canyon. It's beautiful. You know, you don't think a huge hole like that would happen anywhere near you.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I know what sinkholes are, it's crazy. But yes, I have done the little glass thing at the Grand Canyon.
I don't know. I have never been to the Grand Canyon, so I've never experienced it. But I'm like, I don't know if I want it to be glass. Like, I just feel like if you just let me peer over and or have a nice railing or something, like just be caged in rather than glass, because it's like glass is too visual for me. That's too.
It's pretty scary. Speaking of glass, have you ever been to the Sears Tower, or I guess the Willis Tower in Chicago, where like they do the glass, like the little sky, I forgot what they call it.
No.
Have you ever done that before? It's the same thing. You go all the way up and you walk out onto the glass so you can see like the whole city beneath you. But it is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. Me and Andrew went once and he was like, I'm stepping like an inch onto the glass for the photo and then like I'm done. He was like, I'm not going all the way out.
I'm going to dive back in as soon as I hear the click.
Yeah, he did. He was like, the picture's done? Okay, we're done. It's scary to just be able to, because you just don't know. It's just creepy.
So what do you do when you do see a sinkhole? How do you just kind of push it aside? Do you just like, you know what? You just avoid?
I just avoid it. I just avoid it at all costs. I don't want to hear about a sinkhole. And I have a friend of mine who like, he'll be a real asshole and just like send me sinkholes just for shits and giggles, like, hey, check this out. And then I click on the link and it's just like this big fucking hole. And I'm like, don't send me that. He sent me one time and it was this is the craziest shit ever. It was like video of a highway, or I don't know if it was a highway or just a road, whatever. But there's these cars driving on this road.
Mm-hmm.
And this truck drives by the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And as he's leaving that spot, this big hole opens up, like as soon as he's driving off. And then a car comes right after him and just goes in the hole. Like, it wasn't that deep of a hole. Like, she didn't die or anything. It was like she just went, cut like a few feet in and her car was stuck. But that was the last one that he sent me. And it was like, sinkhole on the highway. I was like, why would you send this to me? I don't want to see this.
So let me paint you a scenario. We're past the pandemic. We're doing in-person counseling. So you're going to do an in-home session with a couple. They've invited you to their home to do a session. You walk to their house, and between you and their house is a sinkhole.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God. That's the ultimate dilemma, because me professionally, I can't just bow out of the session. But me personally, that would terrify me. I probably would. How close is the sinkhole to their house?
It's their front yard. So it's like the ground is lava kind of situation where their front yard is a sinkhole.
Nope. I wouldn't do it. I would not. I know that probably makes me look like a really bad therapist, but I would just have to get back in my car and call them and I'd say, hey, I have an issue with sinkholes. I would be honest. I would tell them I have an issue with like, hey, what you're going to therapy for? I go to therapy for my anxiety, which sinkholes is a part of that. So I can't, I can't do that. We're gonna have to find somewhere else to do these sessions. So I would be honest, but I would go in there.
Fix it yourself.
Yeah, it's on you.
And so does your boy, you mentioned your boyfriend at Chicago, does your boyfriend know your fear of sinkholes?
Yes. Yeah, he knows. And he's very comforting, because sometimes we'll just be laying down or we'll just be somewhere and I'll just randomly think, like, what if this is the moment where a sinkhole just appears underneath us? I'll tell him, I'm like, I just have a feeling.
Do you sleep on top of him so that if there is a sinkhole, you just fall in him, and so you're cushioned the fall?
I'll be really close to him, and I'm like, you're close enough for me to catch on. He has to be my shield if that happens. But no, he's really comforting. He'll always just say, that's not going to happen. We'll be fine. There'll be no hole. And yeah.
Just be like, I love you, but you're falling first.
That's basically it. Like, you're here to protect me, right? I love you so much, but I really need you to do this for me.
Your love language is to fall into this sinkhole for me.
And he's just like, okay.
Does he like step on places where you think it's a potential sinkhole? Do you send him out there to step around the hole?
There is one at our apartment that I think I've had him get near. And it's not even, I mean, I wouldn't even, because there's like the grass in our apartment, and there's like a little, I wouldn't even call it a hole. It's just more of like an indent in the like grass. And I've had him check that out before. I'm like, can you see if that's like deep or like how big it is? And like, he will, and he'll just come back and he's like, it's just like it's just like an indent in the grass, you know? He's so calm and rational about it. And I'm totally not.
Well, that's good. Does your family know? Like,
I don't think my family knows. And not that I've like purposefully not told them. I think I just haven't ever brought it up. But
just sit them down and be like, Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something.
I have something to tell you. It's really serious.
Your parents would be so furious because they would be thinking it's grandparents. Like they would so think it's like, because you were in a relationship now. Like all of a sudden when a couple sits of parents down, it's only one thing, and then you just say, I'm afraid of sinkholes. What?
Yeah, my mom would especially be upset. She would especially be upset. Like, this is not what I expected. My dad might find it funny, but yeah.
Now, if you put baby clothes on the sinkhole, that would be hilarious.
Wait, that would be like like you'd have you like post the photos of like, it's just like a pair of like baby shoes in the background. Like that would be mine, but it would just be like, here's my sinkhole anxiety announcement. Here's my sinkhole baby shoes.
We'll have a sinkhole reveal party.
Yeah. Exactly. That would be great.
So when you do shop for houses, do you ask them, like, is this a sinkhole like neighborhood? Like, you're not even worried about the crime rate. Like, what's the sinkhole rate in this area?
You know, I don't know if I've asked like specifically about sinkholes, but I am always really curious about the foundation, and I am always looking on the walls. Like, are there any cracks? Like, does the floor seem like it's uneven? Like, I will check stuff like that out, even if I'm just looking at the house. Because if I feel funny about it or something looks weird, it creeps me out.
If all these doors don't open and close properly.
Yes, seriously. If one even sticks, I'm like, something ain't right with the foundation.
That's going to be a lot of homes, though. I know we had a house in Euless and we were on new construction. And so that's the worry about new construction, is it's good now because we settled everything, but you don't know what time's going to do to this area, especially after we bulldozed it. And so there was like a huge like rushing water in our backyard. So my mom was going to make a rock garden.
Yeah. I guess that's true. I mean, people get excited about new developments, but you really don't know what's going to happen after it's not new anymore. So there's just kind of a, I guess, positive and negative to that as well.
So Lyndsey, I thank you for sharing your fear of sinkholes with us. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. It's at Sex Therapy with Lyndsey.
That's awesome. And I hope you get all this counseling, we get back on track and you're able to do in person, unless you really enjoy virtual.
I really don't. I mean, virtual is fine. Like, I think the world we're in now, I think virtual and telehealth is always going to be, I think it'll never go away now. I think it's going to be a really popular option, but I do enjoy in-person sessions more, especially if it's a really emotional session. It's a little hard to emotionally open up if you're just at home by yourself, technically. So I'm looking forward to more of like in-person interactions for sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine if they're crying like, there. Yeah. That's usually what I say, and then I go, okay, time's up. I gotta go. Oh wait, sorry, I had you on mute. My bad. Just say that out of nowhere. Just be after they've been sobbing for like Sorry, I had you on mute. Where were we?
My technology's so hard. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on. It was a good time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Lyndsey.
All right. Bye.
So that was Lyndsey. I find it interesting that sometimes how you can learn about something and it just affects you so much that it causes you to possibly lose sleep at night. Sinkholes are a scary thought. Like, you just don't realize erosion and how the land underneath your house works. And that sometimes you could just be pulled in to a sinkhole. It's a very rare occurrence, but still, it's terrifying to know that in an instant you could just disappear and no one could possibly find you because of how sinkholes travel underground. So you could be lost forever. I thank Lyndsey for sharing that. If you want to check out her therapy, it's at Sex Therapy with Lyndsey on Instagram. I'll put it in the show notes. If you're some news from me, this weekend I worked at Backdoor, and this week I was booked for my first headlining show at Hyenas in Dallas, off of Mockingbird Station. I'm really excited. I'm a little nervous, because headlining's a big deal. It's not just doing 45 minutes. It's being comfortable with being the guy. Because everything leads up to your moment, to your 45 minutes in comedy here. So you have an opener that kind of starts the show and gets the crowd to pay attention. You got a feature that kind of gets them warmed up and ready to go. And then it's you, the headliner, who's, meant to take the baton from the feature and raise it to its highest point and then get to a point where everybody wants to leave. It'll be a very interesting night. It'll be February 4th. I'll post the event in the show notes if you want to get reserved seats for that show. I'm real excited. I'll also be working with Eric Myers at the end of February. I've started to record new episodes. I have a guest I'm recording this Tuesday. It's going to be a very fun time. I'm excited for that. I'm going to have some more recordings as we go. I have some new episodes that I've edited and they're ready to go. And so life is going pretty well. Weather's not as cold. And so now, just kind of watching football games and saying goodbye to football and hello to basketball and all the other sports that come with spring and summer. I thank you guys for listening. Remember to leave a review on Apple or Google or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have questions, send me an email. But again, thanks for listening. And now some credits and thank yous for the people that make this show possible. Thanks to Barry Whitewater, who does my graphics and design for my comedy as well as my podcast. You can follow him on Instagram at bwhiteh2o. Get it, Whitewater. Also, a big thank you to Gunnar Olsen for my music. You can follow him on Instagram at gunbuns. That's GUNBUNS. You can also check out his website at gunnarolsen.net. And you can check out his awesome EPs and some music he's got coming out. Real excited for him. If you want to follow me on social media, I am at Ryan Perio on all social media. It's RyanPerrio. If you want to follow the show, I highly recommend it. Instagram and Twitter is at Some Fear Fans. Facebook group is Some of All Fears. If you have questions for the show or feedback, email me at somefearfans@gmail.com. If you want to be a guest on the show, also email me at somefearfans@gmail.com. We can make that happen. Please keep leaving reviews on Apple Podcast or whatever podcast platform you listen to. I just appreciate seeing that people like what I'm putting out. So if you like what you hear, go ahead and leave a review. I appreciate all of you for listening. And next week, we'll have another guest with another fear. Thanks for listening to the Sum of All Fears.